All right, we are here in the remote studio. Thanks again to F.Inc. for lending us this space with Malte, who's CTO of Vercel. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Glad to be here.
Did I get it right, Ubel? I've actually never pronounced it out loud until just now.
That was completely perfect. It rhymes with Google.
Ah, okay. So perfect that you worked on search at Google and AMP and Wiz, which I think still people don't know enough about Wiz.
It is no longer a secret, but yeah, you can't use it. So unless you work at Google, in which case you probably know what it is. Otherwise, there's no reason to really know.
Anyway, suffice to say that you are responsible for a lot of the web as it is today. So thank you for spending some time with us. You're also obviously now building the next web, as we say, with Vercel. And we can cover framework-defined infrastructure. I think you probably saw I have a lot of interest in self-provisioning runtimes. We can cover V0, but here really this part is recorded right after you did Ship AI, which we're trying to sort of recap, right, for the general latent space audience who may not be watching Vercel as closely as I do or you do. So basically just generally what I guess is your message to the broader AI engineer audience on what Vercel is doing with AI?
Yeah, I think the super high level view is that what we're really trying to do is we're like the biggest fan of the AI engineering movement. And we are also fans of, we're not just going super hard on hype and the big ideas and talking about things, but being very concrete about agents are very exciting and you can actually build them. Right. And so I think our entire conference was about both making that easier, right, and discovering the right abstractions as we're kind of figuring out what people actually want to do, right, which is emerging as we speak. Then the way Vercel always does these things is by building things ourselves, right? And so that is both in terms of products, so agents that are products that you can purchase from Vercel, and stuff that we do basically in our back office to make our own operations more efficient. And so this kind of building of apps lets us ground kind of what we do in that reality, and then kind of extract the abstractions that we feel are really helpful to then put that on the road. And I think the probably most talked about thing that we shipped at the conference was our new workflow development kit, which really is just a way to make writing workflows very idiomatic, as something that just becomes kind of first class. It's something you do every day. You don't think about it. You don't write 15 design docs just because you want one of them. It's just something you do literally every day. I think since your audience also more generally probably listening to what people talk about, I think there's been a lot of talk about our workflow development kit, but also more generally what are workflows, what are agents, how are they related, do you use one or the other? I would actually love to talk about that as well, but obviously in our conference, we basically introduced just what we hope is by far the easiest way to make your agents something that is easily embeddable into complex workflows, and to make those workflows durable, zoomable, streamable, and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, as listeners might know, I have a long history of workflows at Temporal. And I think what's weird is a lot of people are discovering this for the first time. You don't really learn about this in CS classes. You don't really learn about this in boot camps or anything like that, because it's not really a unit of compute and storage that is taught. It's kind of emergent from, Uber and Stripe and everyone else. I don't know if there's a version of this at Google.
I mean, there's a version of this at every single company that has been doing anything in computer since 1950.
Yeah.
But what's not necessarily the case is that it has been abstracted in any way, right? But when I run a bank transaction system in 1975, then I invent this, right? Maybe I'm in pure batch processing world and I kind of avoided it, but the reality is that I built this, right? And so either I use something very productized, which obviously Temporal innovated on, that being a thing, or I use something that's ad hoc, right? So I go and say, well, I need some kind of queue that tracks the work, and I need a database to store the state at any given point. And I don't know, maybe I write a cron job that makes sure that the stuff on the queue doesn't get stuck, right? And so I think what's extremely common in essentially every transaction processing system that has ever created is that there either is an explicit abstraction for workflows in it, or someone made one ad hoc because otherwise the thing just doesn't work.
Yeah, totally. So the headline thing for people who maybe haven't dived into workflows enough is that you can sort of wait and resume code. So it's as though the serverless function is kind of indefinitely long running. Like literally you can run an infinite loop inside of your serverless code, and that breaks a lot of people's mental model if they don't really understand that the code pauses and resumes, and you can wait multiple days and it doesn't matter. It doesn't cost anything. Actually, I don't know if it doesn't cost anything. Maybe I don't know if you charge.
No, it literally does not cost anything. So yeah, you can run compute for infinite amount of time. You can then also, whenever like one of these steps fails, automatically retry them, stuff like that. That makes things more reliable.
Yeah, and so like it has a lot of parallels to long-running orchestration problems for agents. If you want to do human in the loop as well, it's a simple task of waiting for, what's the API that you guys have? It's not, I want to say signals, but you have something like resolve webhook or something.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit, it's similar to a signal, but like the idea is that you make a webhook, like an ephemeral one, which is just a URL that you can ping. And then, so the realistic flow would be you reach that step where you want human approval. You know, let's say you get the webhook URL and you write it to some database. And let's say the user now, they log into their computer 2 hours later, they have a queue of things they need to approve. That's from the database. They click on one, they say approve. Now what just happens is that system now calls that webhook. And then from the perspective of the workflow that you originally implemented, you were now able to await that webhook, and now it resolves, and you can just proceed with the program.
Yeah. It's very elegant. I would say that it eliminates some complexity that we introduced at Temporal, and that's probably for the better. And the other thing I think it just, obviously, as someone who's like in this space a lot, and like I've seen all the solutions, you made it open source, which is another above and beyond thing. You could have made it proprietary, but you didn't.
Yeah, I think the way we think about Vercel, and I think I don't want to go too deep into that tangent, but I think about open source as having essentially 3 business models. Okay. The first one is Red Hat, where you just sell support. You think it's open source. The second one is open core, where you are the only one that gets to monetize it, but everyone else gets to run it if they want, right? And Vercel maybe has not invented this, but certainly kind of is the most successful at a model where you say, okay, I have this software library and it's truly open source. Everyone can run it. It comes with like adapters for every place on the planet, and that makes it really popular. And then we get a piece of the pie. And so our strategy is to grow the pie, while what we actually see is that our pie piece is a relatively constant size in proportion to the pie, right? And so we can drive the open source project. And so that's why, like, I don't want to say we're like, we're in it for the business model, but like I think it's a business model that has more winners than the alternatives.
I think also something that if people are seriously evaluating for production workloads, they care about, because and I ran into this in Temporal, like these are going to be extremely valuable workloads that you're going to put on workflows, and so you want some ownership, you want some auditability. In practice, like who's going to actually run it themselves? Probably not, but you want the option. You want to check the checkbox.
100%. Yeah. And I actually do think people will run it themselves, and that's great.
Awesome. So that's workflows. By the way, I think the most disgusting is the use of directives. Use cache, use no memo, use Nemo, use whatever. So fun. I don't know if you ever take on directives in general.
To be honest, I don't feel super strongly. I do find, in particular, inside of the workflow dev kit, I find the use pretty elegant. I could imagine other ways of doing it. I think we did post a blog post about like all the alternatives we considered, because there are some that are like that you think about after 5 minutes, and after 2 hours of thinking about it, you realize, maybe this isn't such a good way to do it. But there could be other ways of doing it. Like I think we're working with CC39 to bring decorators into more places, which would kind of make this literally the same. The same thing would happen
above the function instead of below the function.
Yeah. So it's not a big difference, but it would become, for example, you could make it like TypeScript be aware of it without a TypeScript plugin, which we already provide, right? And so I was vibe coding this thing on Sunday, and I said, okay, Claude, you have no idea what use workflow is because it came out on Thursday, but here's the docs. And by the way, put it on my side. And so it did it. It installed a TypeScript plugin for me. So I had like the perfect EX, and it just worked from scratch. So that was great.
Okay, awesome. So we can come back to a workflow anytime you want. But I just wanted to keep moving on like all the stuff you announced. We should probably also just touch on AI SDK. I know you're not like as closely involved to that team, but obviously one of the most successful open source projects. I mean, obviously Vercel is very good at frameworks, but I think it was not a given that AI SDK would be a winner because of LangChain, because of Mastra, because of everyone else trying to get that spot. Except that you guys have the perfect package name, so I think that helps a lot.
I actually don't. I'm not sure how much that helps, but it's great. Like there's a fun background from what people thought AI was for 10 years ago. But I think we announced version 6 beta, and I think the big, I mean, it's not really news because these things are open source and you can follow them very closely, right? But what it does introduce as a stable feature, because it's already as kind of experimental in ASDK 5, is a direct agent abstraction, which so far wasn't there, right? People would build agents with AI SDK, but they would have to do it in a bit more bare bones fashion. What I do want to mention is actually, because you mentioned it's very successful, which is true, and I think the reason why it's successful is because we could strain ourselves to be humble about what we know our users might want to do. The example I like to give, like when you build like a new web framework in 2025, you know exactly what people are going to do. Like it's such a well explored space. As the person doing it probably has done it 3, 4, 5 times in their life and failed and learned from that and tried the other things, right? It's so mature. Like it's the most mature thing. Even 10 years ago, that was also true, right? That's why Next.js is so good, because when Guillermo started building it, he knew exactly what to do. He knew exactly what the app would be. Almost nothing has changed. So the AI app space is the absolute opposite. Like we know absolutely nothing, and we still know absolutely nothing. Things are emerging, but we're so early. And so if you put a very thick abstraction, then it's probably going to be the wrong abstraction. You have to be humble and say, okay, I need to stay low level so that this can be flexibly used as trends emerge, right? And so that's why we didn't have to rewrite AI SDK when everyone went from writing chatbots to writing agents, because we stayed at a level where that almost looked the same. Right.
Yeah, it composes
just stuff people would on top. And I think that's why it's successful, because it doesn't, we didn't say, okay, we know what the apps are going to look like, and we're going to do this like Hollywood principle, don't call us, we call you, style framework, where like you just have to fill in the blanks. It's super structured. You'll be happy, right? Like we didn't do that, even though that was like so in our DNA. Like we did have to like really restrain ourselves. But like that's why it's successful, because it's so low level, right? And so that's why, on the other hand, that's why we don't have an agent abstraction yet. Like every other competing library like leads with that, right?
Yeah, like OpenAI's SDK day one, it was
exactly. Mastra, etc. And I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but and obviously that's more accessible right now. You have to understand an agent is a tool with a loop. What do? I use the stream text function and give it tools.
Okay.
We added all kinds of like control already in ASDK version 5, where you can prepare the step, you can select the tools on every loop, like you can like do all these things in a pretty advanced fashion. Half of those other frameworks are built on top of ASDK anyway, right? Like so that it forms the basis. And so what we're doing now is we're bringing what is emerging as the patterns that people built over and over again as abstraction into the library as the usages kind of are solidifying.
Yeah, one I have interviewed enough agent framework builders and big lab model people that I actually find that I can push back on you.
Okay, go ahead.
It's really interesting, because I think you're saying we will be at the jQuery, kind of at the jQuery era, right? Like we don't know what we want yet. We're building all these like tools to make the smallest possible things easier, and then it composes up, and we're just starting to emerge of agents. I would say that the big lab people are obviously the opposite, but they're coming at it not from like a DX point of view. They're very big model pilled. They want everything to go through the model. The reason they want the Hollywood principle of we'll call you is because they want the model to control the tool calls, the reasoning, what have you. And I feel like there's a mentality. Obviously, you can have frameworks that do both, but there's a mentality in the big labs, if you work at big labs, that you always want to give the wheel to the model. And then for you guys as framework developers and people who are software builders, it's more comfortable to build like the smallest possible thing instead of like the sort of AGI thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I actually don't think about it in those dimensions. I think because I 100% agree that like people I think have to be willing to let go and let the tool, let the model kind of take control, right? And to get emergent behavior. And certainly on coding agents, that works incredibly well. But that I'm totally on point with, right? And that's AI SDK does this very well today. Like all the agents that I've personally built work like this. That's not the saying. But the other thing is like, how do I now embed this into an application, right? Like the model apps couldn't care less because they're not really building applications. And so that's something that a company like Vercel thinks about a lot. Like, again, what does the developer actually want to express, and how do we let them do it? And so, like, I think one of the key things that people wanted and still want is they want streaming because these models are slow.
Yeah.
And so suddenly this almost obscure subgenre of programming where people are like, it's 500 milliseconds, I'm just going to not ship it, right? Suddenly it's 30 seconds and it becomes absolutely important. And so we gave people the tools to build streaming applications in a way that feels intuitive, right? And I think that unlocked a lot of like value there because that was like genuinely hard, and we made it easy. And so those are kind of the things that we're looking for, but that, are not obvious when you're kind of mostly concerned about the AI part.
Fair enough. And I think like the design space has more dimensions than what I try to simplify it down to. Just one more thing on AI SDK, and then we can move on to like the other agent stuff. And obviously you guys announced so much, it's so hard to cover. So Vercel is a house of frameworks, right? You have so many framework authors, all of them legends in their own right. What's one, I guess, philosophy that you're also applying from all your years and all your people who work on frameworks, right? That is informing you. I have one, and feel free to counter propose. Which is what Sebastian Markboga, who's obviously the tech lead of React, is used to say, which is have a small API surface area. I feel like that has maybe been like not as important, or like there are other overwhelming priorities. But I just want to get a sense of like, what governing principles really resonate with you.
Yeah, I mean, Seb and I are talking about this a lot, right? I think I'm often representing the kind of enterprise side where it's like, no, but I actually want to just control this.
Give
right?
me one API for this, just one more, bro.
I want to be like, in control, and I want to be able to configure it, and I want to like define the defaults the way I see it. So I think, but it's good to have like tension around these things. I think the thing that like coming down from Guillermo is just the absolute founding principle of Vercel is that we never give you an abstraction that we haven't used ourselves. Like dogfooding is ultimately the thing, right? Like that, like AI SDK was extracted from V0, and then we built it and we kind of diverged a little bit, and then we took on the substantial work to bring back V0 actually fully hosted on AI SDK, and then we learned back and we made sure that migration isn't too hard, which the users appreciate as well, and so forth, right? And so there's this constant feedback loop where if you don't have that, which is like, this sounds like so obvious, right? But the reality is that framework builders are usually not application builders.
Yeah.
And so they build ivory towers that when they're hyper geniuses, or they get lucky, they happen to be good. But if you want to do this in a reproducible fashion with a high hit rate, then the only thing you can do is you have to try that stuff out yourself. And like, that's what we do every day.
I really like that principle. Obviously a good idea. It's just very hard to practice in real life, obviously, because when you're a maintainer of a framework, a lot of bugs come to you, and they pile up, and you have to spend some time working on framework level issues. Happy to move on to Vercel Agent, and maybe the Agent on Every Desk program, which I think you're kind of also championing. So like, yeah, let's talk about the use cases like that you guys use internal agents within Vercel, and what emerged.
Yeah, let's structure this two ways, because I do think there's a difference between kind of the agents that we're building internally versus the stuff that's essentially a Vercel product, right?
Yeah,
and which we can use today.
Okay. I thought they were the same thing.
No, they're not the same thing. That's actually, I think that's quite important. Like we're distinguishing between like agent as a service, right? And so the Vercel agent, that's what it is, right? It's ultimately an agent as a service product, similar to, Codex in the cloud or the Cursor agent. Like not as in like it's the same product, right? But as in like these are things where you go somewhere and you say, I would like to use this agent, and then I don't know, maybe you give them a credit card and it works, right? Which is different from the stuff that we run internally. But let's talk about the Vercel agent for a second. Like we've been basically, I think our strategy overall is to have an agent that helps you build applications on Vercel. This is, there is some overlap with coding agents, but like I think the thing that's unique about the Vercel situation is that because we have your runtime data, we see your error logs, we know where the preview deployments are, that they always will exist. We know how to start the dev server. We already have the secrets, so there can be like a quite integrated solution for something that otherwise can be quite hard, right? If you ever onboarded, for example, I mean, you have onboarded Devin a few times, but you probably have, been in that situation where it's like, feels like onboarding a junior employee, right? And so some of these things, like if you're within the Vercel ecosystem, become much more simple. And so in that world, we've been shipping away on different things, right? Like a while ago, shipped a code review agent, which I think is really good and well integrated. And the thing that we announced last week is our broadly DevOps agent, which is actually tied to our anomaly detection system. So whenever there's an anomaly that we detect on your production side, it kicks off the agent, and the agent does an investigation of what's going on. From a technical point of view, what this agent has is several tools. It can make any observability query against your project. So as a query builder, it can execute the queries. It has a way to read logs, obviously with queries as well. So what's really magical is that it's just very good at this. Like by the time you click on the anomaly, it will like almost all the time just very precisely tell you what happened. It shows you all the graphs that I looked at. It just like, I don't know, man, it's just so much easier than doing it yourself. Like it takes away certainly minutes of work. But I think what I'm actually very excited about, and I think this is an overall pattern that we see with agents, is that there in many situations is this what we in search call recall precision problem. And that also happened with anomaly detection. With anomaly detection, you have to tune it, right? And you either tune it to be very aggressive, and then it fires, and the worst case, it pages you in the middle of the night, and nothing was wrong, right? Just the team in Asia sent a newsletter, and so the traffic went up, right? Or you tune it not like aggressive enough, and so you miss events. And with an agent, you can just say, okay, I'm actually going to have this tuned very aggressively, and I'm not waking anyone up. I'm telling the agent, and the agent can take 2 minutes to run. I'm actually fine with that because no one would have reacted in that amount of time in a very reliable fashion. And now it can actually look at a time series, can look what happened. It can look at the IP addresses that are making the request. It can look at the type of error messages, right? And it can make a call whether to escalate to on call and wake someone up, or to say, okay, this is completely fine for someone maybe to take a look next day, which is, I think, the perfect decision for agents to make. And so that's something I'm very excited about, that you have this like essentially coworker that has no sleeping problems in the loop, and they get woken up instead of you.
Yeah, I think the dream of AI SRE has been a long time coming. And I'm actually on the record at the start of this year, I made a podcast saying like, oh, I don't think anyone's going to do AI SRE. So I'm very excited. I haven't tried it out personally. I have seen you tweet about it. And I think, yes, obviously that is the goal. That is the dream. We should make Brian Johnson happy and have good sleep.
Yeah.
But, we're not exactly there yet. And I think like the question is really fold, which is time series analysis is not exactly within the distribution for language models. There have been a lot of people doing like time series models. There's a deep field of anomaly detection, which is basically what you're doing. And, there's a question about like, is this a solved problem, or, like how much can we trust it? And then I think the other one is like aligning the human preferences, right? Like sometimes like, I don't know until I've seen a few examples of like, oh yeah, this one you should wake me up, the other one you should not. And then pretty much like when I solve the problem, it goes away. So like the next problem, you're always fighting the last war in SRE.
Yeah.
So I give you a bunch of things. You can take whatever you want.
I think that the like you have to try the product. It works really well. So we don't do the anomaly detection in the LLM, right? The anomaly detection is it's
a separate part of the Vercel product.
It's a completely separate part. It's a pipeline that works on our time series database, right? And launched independently of this. And so, but once you have this, our experience is that, if you give these agent a tool that does queries, it's really good actually at digging into individual parts of the time series. And the other thing it has access to is logs. And logs are actually, they're just text, right? So if you see from the time series, like what happened, can I somehow figure out like what this is? And then you head over to logs and do a deeper dive. Now you're kind of more in the world where the model is comfortable. One thing that we don't do today, but we'll do in the future, is that we also give the Model X, that particular agent, access to your source code so that it can, first of all, figure out like what does the error message mean, right? And every time you can actually make a PR to just fix it, but every so often that'll be possible. And so it would then also do that.
Which is why I think like people like Datadog and Sentry are trying to do that, obviously, because they're observability platforms, but they never own the code. And so like they're always limited in what they can do, you know, like, and
100%. But also like, what I want to qualify where I'm so happy about how well it works is like, it's just a small part of the overall problem, right? Like we're actually not here to like build the AI SRE that replaces that job function. Like that's another part of what I feel pretty passionate about, that it's at this moment, they're like, agents are both extraordinarily effective and still very ineffective. And you have to find the right problems. And then when you find the right problems, they are super magical. And if you wander beyond, then they don't work. And so like that's kind of the magic, right? And what we see is that getting triggered on like a increased error rate works well. And certainly making the decision what to change in the firewall, I would not let the agent do that yet, right? Like it's just too dangerous.
Or do DNS migrations.
Exactly. That's
that would be AGI. Yeah, it's interesting on all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this growing consensus of like where agents are doing well and where agents are not. I think, you know, for me, like meeting notes are solved. You know, like simple like UI changes are solved. I guess like what else, you know, in that list of like things that are solved that and like are reliable every day. What do you put in that bucket?
Yeah, I think so I had a section in my keynote about this, and like it boils down to this question. Like basically where the idea is that you go around your company and you ask people like, what do you hate most about your job? And I really think it finds the sweet spot, because it finds problems that they're boring because they're tedious and repetitive, but they're, you know, they would have already been automated if they were automated, but without an agent in many cases. They often like do require some kind of text, like mini judgment, etc. Right? So like people do these things, and so that's I think that that question that yields a sweet spot where like the problems are probably easy enough for a current generation agent to handle, and they're also often very high business impact because this is actually a pretty substantial part of people's jobs. Again, that's why they hate it, because it's like it takes so long. And so we ended up at our conference talking about 3 agents that we built internally, 2 of which we open sourced. Again, so people have a starting point, because these are custom agents. Like they're not software as a service things that you just install. So these are custom agents. But like the first one is one that handles processing of our incoming contact sales requests.
Yeah, lead qualification.
Right.
Yeah.
And that there are obviously a lot of startups in that space, right? Like, so I think that's very much in like the soft case, where like you give it a tool for LinkedIn, you give it a more generic tool for Google, you give it a bit of an objective and like dequalify, like what do you care about, right? You give it a way to analyze, oh, this is really a support request. Okay, hand it over to the support team, right? Like there's a few cases like that. It's not so complicated. So that one I think is perfect. And we open sourced that so people can make their own. The other one that we falls into a similar category is abuse analysis. So we get abuse like reports. And so in this case, it's really the agent essentially doing the pre-work. So we still have a human person like look at the pre-work and then make the decision what happens in the end. But what were they going to do? They were going to go to the reported website, right? They were going to go look at the account and figure out what the age of the account is, and they were going to see if they paid their bills and whatever, right? Like there's a list of things they will do. And so what you can do is you can just make it so that when they eventually look at the ticket, it already has all this information. And if the page looked like a Facebook login page, then current day LLM is also able to do that, like make that judgment call, and then you just quickly check if it's okay, and you move forward.
Yeah, amazing. And I think there's one more data analyst agent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is also something we just wanted for ourselves, right? Is to do.
we have one too internally. Yeah.
Yeah, like and I think it's that one's also open source. I think the idea is that you want to ask questions against your data warehouse, and we were very unsatisfied with the current solutions because they ultimately didn't have access to enough information. about the data model. And like, we are not promising that we have the magical tool that you give you your prompt and it spits out SQL, just access your schema. But we essentially develop just a structured way to document the semantics of your data, so that then the agent is good enough, right? And so we've been using that internally quite successfully.
Amazing. So yeah, for those who don't know, Vercel also has an agent on every desk program where you can sort of reach out, and is it like a forward deployed engineering situation where like you have like a SWAT team that comes in and helps people?
Yes, I think but it's also not appropriate for every company, right? So I think my take is that if I'm a large company, I have a lot of efficiency to gain, but it's also quite daunting to ship my first agent. And so something like a forward deployed engineers, which we are doing indeed, like does help quite a bit in that scenario. I think like as a startup, I don't want a forward deployed engineer in my office. I just want to see the open source project and feed it to Cloud Code and then give it my own problem and say, build me something like that. But like, here's what I want different. And that should also be successful, right? So I think we are kind of with this particular program really going for just unblocking people who feel that they just don't know what to do. They hear the hype, right? They don't know how to pick the right project. We talked about this, like how do you actually find the project that's going to be both successful and high impact? And then secondarily, okay, now that I have the project identified, how do I do it? And I think that they're like, forward deployment is effective. It's something that I as a framework engineer, I've thought about all my life, where like you need to have someone kind of guide you the first time you do something. And then the second time, maybe, you build an agent yourself. So we don't want to stay there, right? We basically sign contracts with companies saying, okay, you have to commit to building 3 agents. And if you do, we're going to help you. Like we want to build the first one for you. And then the second one, we are going to be there essentially by your side, maybe not literally, but like on a phone rotation, right? And for the third one, the assumption is that you actually don't need any help anymore, and you can still reach out, obviously, but if everything went well, now this is a company that's empowered to build its own custom agents.
Yeah, you're going to be helping your biggest customers, and obviously that's going to be leading to a lot of good products ideas, right? It's kind of dogfooding at scale with the people in the Vercel ecosystem, and not just Vercel alone.
100%. You just discover things that probably the 500-person startup would not have discovered.
I think one last thing, just to leave off the whole topic, and we can add in anything on the Ship AI side. Actually, anything else on Ship AI that you really want to cover, get a soapbox about? I don't know if we covered everything.
I think like one point that we haven't talked about is that we, like Vercel as a company, just has been investing in Python quite a while. I think maybe the audience of this podcast might also be excited about this. AI SDK obviously currently is a pure play TypeScript system. We do find Python really interesting. What we have done over the last weeks is we have shipped like zero config support on Vercel for all the popular Python framework like Flask and Fast API. Zero config means that you're going to get the Vercel experience where you throw your stuff over the fence and we're going to run it for you. No questions asked. And then just as another thing, like we have, for example, also shipped a Python SDK for our API, just to kind of, again, show that we are engaging with that ecosystem. It's very obviously something that is in a way new for Vercel, but like we have been making hires and infrastructure investments to make Python really well supported on Vercel. It is also on our Fluid Compute program, which gets you, for example, active CPU pricing. So you get to run Python in production, and you only pay when you have compute. And otherwise, it's free, which is very nice if your backend takes 30 seconds to respond because it's an AI model.
I was also going to make the observation that workflows are very nicely meshed. Like it's almost like there's this fate that you're driving towards, workflows that you needed Fluid Compute in order to do all these fancy things, or at least make it easy to ship this kind of stuff.
Right. Like I think there's some overlap, right? Like I think the Fluid, like with workflows, literally nothing's running between steps, right? So it's literally free. That's also why it's free, because there's literally just nothing happening. Versus Fluid Compute, which does have the same property, except it's more agile, right? Like usually in a workflow, I don't know, you're doing the FFmpeg thing, then you're doing the AI model, right? Like you're not talking millisecond latency. There's some overhead on each step, versus Fluid Compute being like the VM being literally on, which does operate on a different kind of level.
Yeah, excellent. And then on the Python thing, what happened to always bet on JavaScript? Like, isn't that the Brendan Ike line? Basically, I guess the broader, the non-cheeky question is, are we like 50-50 Python, JavaScript now? Is that the future? There's no particular language that will win, or, do we not have an opinion?
I don't think I have an opinion. I saw today that like TypeScript is now, as of today, is the biggest language on GitHub, right? Which last year you had to still cope that TypeScript and JavaScript is like drastically bigger than Python. Honestly, obviously I don't really care. I think both communities are very relevant, very large, and we are investing in supporting them. Like the way Vercel's infrastructure works, because we essentially just run VMs, it is not actually hard for us to support Python. We will eventually do PHP and Ruby, but we also, I think, care a lot about the details. And so essentially the reason why we haven't done it yet is because we do invest a substantial amount of time to make the DX actually good and feel native to the ecosystem. And so that's why it's like technically easy, but like in practice, actually very, very difficult for us to support these things. So we're taking it careful, but like we are, there's no technical restriction on our system where we couldn't support all of these different ways of running code.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a very fair response. And the fact is that I think when you're a serious AI cloud, you have to support Python. So there's
Exactly.
no way around it. Okay, I wanted to zoom out. One other thing that we care about in AI engineering is AI leadership, which is leadership of AI engineers. And obviously your role as CTO has changed a lot since you joined. What are some, I guess, leadership principles that you've had to, I guess, create from first principles? When you're obviously you're in a very unusual type CTO role where you're in an infra company, you have frameworks, you have apps. What comes to mind when I say, how has the CTO role changed for you?
Yeah, so I joined Vercel like a little bit less than 4 years ago. And that was before ChatGPT. I came directly from Google, and I think I had some insights there of what was happening. But Vercel certainly wasn't living in this world. That was kind of the tail end of the last really big crypto wave, and everything else, right? And so then suddenly the AI revolution happened, and the thing that I definitely had to work through is like, how do I transform the company into something quite different? And I think the solution that we have come to feels really good. And I think there's a lesson there to be learned for companies that haven't done the transition yet, is that you have to do something that feels native to your company. And so the two big bets that we made early on, one being V0 and one being AI SDK, I think they felt like native to Vercel in the sense that V0 was especially originally designed as a tool for making web pages. Like the full stack stuff came later with the Sonnet models. And originally it was very much a web development tool. And AI SDK was a framework for building AI apps. And because we're a framework company, it felt really native. And I think you have to make that, you have to be honest with yourself, like what product, even if I do have to change to building something else, does kind of extend naturally from what I'm doing, rather than being very kind of being something entirely different and no one believes me that I would be the right place to buy that from.
That I think that's just generally timeless advice. Have manager to IC ratios gone up? Do you know what I mean?
That's a really good question. I don't track that very closely.
Okay.
I think that
it's a thesis of mine.
I would be supportive of it going up. It's a big question, like the role of the engineering manager. I have 2 reports.
Nice.
Right. So that's the way we're organized.
It's a privilege to the CTO that you don't, VPE is usually the people manager.
Yeah.
CTO.
But that's actually not the point. The point is that it's like the one thing that Google really got right is that it has very strong ICs. It has IC levels all the way up, right? There's Sanjay at level 11, and so we're doing the same thing, and so we had to have someone as an IC at the top level, right? And so that's why I think this is another thing that you have to be willing to, as a company, to live in this world where you don't make your strongest engineers have the choice of not making more money or becoming a potentially very bad manager, right? Because there's little correlation from being the best engineer to being the right manager, right? You could be. Sometimes you have these moments of, oh my God, glad we made this change, but like that's it's essentially a crapshoot whether that happens.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I find at, obviously Peter principle applies. It's just that principle of promoting people to the level of incompetence. I think the other interesting thing that people are finding is that PMs and designers are now starting to contribute more to code because they feel they can just vibe code something. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I don't know if there's standards around this that have been established inside of Vercel where there used to be clear code owners, and now because we feel that we're coding agents, we feel we can do a lot more, and maybe that's caused some politics somewhere.
100%. Like we want to be at the avant-garde of doing this, right? Like as makers of V0, like we highly encourage all our employees to like contribute code. I think one thing we haven't talked about, and we might have time to go into, but like we are very deeply working on a way to build apps that follows the threat model that assume that the developer doesn't know what they're doing. And also they're using AI that's also doesn't know what they're doing. And so I want to be able to build an app that is secure, even if the developer is incompetent, right? But today, that's not the case, right? Today, I assume a developer is competent.
Full trust.
Right? Like, and so we have, I think, very strong progress there. And we're working with lots of large companies that have data, for example, where you have the idea that you say, well, auth cannot be part of the app because they're not going to get that right? So auth has to be extracted from the app. In fact, which data you can see, they also cannot be under control of the app because, again, you're going to get it wrong, right? And so we're building these systems that try to have a minimum amount of security fully independent of the quality of the app. And I think that is part of the future of how people will build stuff.
Okay,
and
so this
probably
is
a good idea anyway.
This is Vercel level, not so much V0 or Next.js level. Like an infra.
Yeah, in a way, in an integrated fashion, right? Because I'm going to build the app in V0 and now I want to deploy it to my fellow coworkers. Only the right people should be able to access it. And when they access it, they only should see the right data.
Yeah, I think this is very exciting. I think like the closest people have come to this is WorkOS, basically. I think there should be more like agent native, if we can call it that, infrastructure that lets people build and vibe code safely. Which we all want to enable them. They just cannot be trusted. This is very insightful. I'm very excited to see that. Ping me when it comes out. But otherwise, thank you for spending the time to recap all Vercel stuff. I cannot imagine a better person to talk to. You're so generous and friendly and engaged. I definitely don't feel like all CTOs are as engaged with like regular developers as you are.
I'm trying my best and I'm spending too much time on X. But yeah, this is super fun. Thanks you so much for having me.